A presentation, How Consumer Behavior Has Changed in the Last 30 Years. Hello and welcome. My presentation tonight is on how consumer behavior has changed in the last 30 years. But for me to give a presentation on this subject in about 8 minutes, in my opinion, is not fair to the subject matter. So I'm going to present as much information as I can to plant the marketing seeds for further study by the student and the listener. Let me begin with the definition of consumer behavior. According to Wikipedia, consumer behavior is the study of individuals, groups, or organizations and the processes they use to select, secure, use, and dispose of products, services, experiences, or ideas to satisfy needs and the impacts that these processes have on the consumer and society. It blends elements from psychology, sociology, social anthropology, marketing, and economics. Whoa! But it's also defined in simpler terms such as the actions a person takes in purchasing and using products and services, including the mental and social processes that come before and after these actions. Next, we get into what I want to organize as a consumer purchase decision process and experience. The purchase decision process, the 5 stages. In the pyramid, you can't really see it because it's so small, but it's the hierarchy of needs, and I've just outlined them here. 1, problem recognition and perceiving a need. Information search and seeking value. Alternative evaluation and assessing value. Purchase decision and buying value. And 5th, post-purchase behavior and the value in consumption or use. And on up to safety needs, social needs, personal needs, and self-fulfillment needs. In this frame, I'll talk a little bit about before and after. Do you remember before? Before the Walmarts and the supercenters, a lot of American consumers would purchase tools, dry goods, staples from the local general store or country store. A lot of consumers refuse to shop at Walmart stores these days. The fact is that by the end of 2017, there were 4,672 Walmarts throughout the United States. That includes discount stores, neighborhood stores, supercenters, and Sam's Club. Walmart stores were founded in 1962. But it's also because of social, economic, and political reasons consumers move on to new trends, changes, and technologies. So when the local country stores began to phase out and away from America's small towns, and which are now practically extinct, how was consumer behavior affected? Now I'll start to rewind and go to the 1980s and 30 years ago. What was new and what was trending? In 1985, Sears, Roebuck and Company was the largest United States retailer. According to the LA Times, the 1980s was a decade of dangerous buying. There was also double recessions. MTV and USA Today were introduced. The Sony Walkman was already out, and bread makers were on countertops in all over homes across the nation. The auto industry's new ideas hit the road, including the Mazda Miata, the Mazda Miata, and the Plymouth Voyager. In 1989, electronic products surged in sales from 100.6 billion to 256 billion. Now, today's choices in how we buy, what we buy, why we buy, compared to 30 years ago. And I started this one off by talking about cars and cars, why we drive, what we drive, and how the global industry gave us more choices. I mean, car sales and the way we buy cars. And I'll get to that a little later on in another frame. But it's a whole different way of doing things than it was 30 years ago. And how it changed marketing strategies is another subject. Then we get into technology, PCs, mobile devices, robotics, drones, even my robotic vacuum cleaner. But just a little personal news, when I was in sales in the mid 90s, cell phones had just come out and I was in sales, so all the sales staff was given a big Motorola cell phone, and it allowed me to call out and receive phone calls. And I was so psyched. I thought that was the best thing since sliced bread. But looking at today, it was so archaic, and I mean, compared to the mobile devices that I have now, the mobile device that I have now. Next, I want to talk about television. Back to the 80s, I remember Comcast, a few extra channels, no flat screens, old cable boxes, but in marketing, was the impact to TV commercials exploding or was it gradual? I mean, cable TV radically revolutionized TV commercials, advertising, and marketing approaches. Then I talk about shopping trends. Are brick and mortar stores on their way out, just like the country stores and the general stores? But is Walmart on the way out too, with the competition of Amazon? So something to think about. Then I get into social media, how it's taken other forms of advertising. The millennials spend a lot of time on YouTube, Facebook, all of them, Pinterest, Twitter, and I mean, newspapers and magazines, they're practically, I'm surprised they're not already gone. And lastly, I want to talk here in this frame about food and groceries. How we buy our food, has it really changed that much in 30 years? I don't think so. I mean, we all still go to the grocery store. The biggest thing at the grocery store now is self checkout. Um, but, other than all the health food stores, but that's been going on for 30 years too. That started back then, 30 years ago. So that finishes this part of the presentation. Next, I want to talk about consumer behavior yesterday and today. From the baby boomer generation to the X generation and on to the Y generation, also known as the millennials. So everyone knows that the X generation was from 65 to 80 and the millennials from 80 to now. But 30 years ago, the baby boomers were at the height of their game. Back then, a PC home computer was just coming out. Minivans were produced to compete with the station wagon. Monthly bills were paid by personal checks. Demographics and target markets could only be accomplished through minimum medias, like the newspaper. Today, it's a set of new generations. And it was recently reported that hundreds of millennials have already saved $100,000 by age 35. Better savers or just better wage earners or better consumers? Question. And there I just talked more about YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. But then I want to talk about age groups, cultures and subcultures and genders and more. Women are now buying 68% of new cars. The auto industry is aware and taking marketing action. It changes how companies target and market old ideas with new technology or new ideas with innovation, success, and the new technology. Today, what we are seeing and experiencing, consumer empowerment. By the beginning of the new millennium, the internet profoundly changed consumer behavior. The era of online shopping dawned. Between 2003 and 2004, online shopping in America had risen by 26%. But this part of my research goes on to talk about in the United States, 3 out of 4 consumers were shopping for new cars online, even though the final purchase was nearly always made from traditional dealers. However, the consumer was entering the store armored with information about the products as well as best available deals. So this was only the beginning. With the advent of consumer-driven online and open source innovation, consumer empowerment was taken to a completely different level. Consumers were now actively engaged in designing products and services to meet their needs and were acting as advisors to the service providers. And finally, here's a link to a YouTube that talks about the millennials and how they've changed consumer behavior and how it's changing now. And then there's my sources, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.